Hi, Steve Stahlberg here with monthly painting video number 59, made in Kuala Lumpur, November 2018. This month I'm doing an action scene from a horror movie, a movie about zombies. Well, don't ask me why. When inspiration strikes, I just go with it. It's gonna be nighttime and raining with a scared, scantily clad female, which of course is one of the most common tropes in horror. A streak of light is gonna cut across her to kind of make her pop out a bit, as she's the main focus, the main character. And yeah, always decide what is the main focus and make that number one on the weight scale. Weight is here I use it as a term for a subjective measure of how important a focus is to our visual cortex. It's a bit tricky to explain in just a few words, but I think most people get it. It's just a theory I have about composition, like main focus, secondary, tertiary, like 1, 2, 3, 4 in descending order, or A, B, C, D, however you want to frame it. I'm sketching it here on a dark background because it's nighttime, and adjusting proportions a little bit. Also, she has a gun, which she's just fired because she's surrounded by approaching zombies, which you see I'm starting to sketch here. And maybe now she's out of bullets, which would explain why she's so scared. Or not, I guess it's up to the viewer a little bit to make their own story, to make the details of the story their own here. In the background you'll see some lights there. There's a helicopter spraying napalm, or like a flamethrower, or I guess it's napalm, indicating that the government is aware of the threat and has begun countermeasures. Will they save her in time? Also, she has glasses, as you can see there. Because Glasses Girl is best girl, but I actually regretted that decision later when it came to raindrops. Well, just the glasses themselves, to get them to look symmetrical in a perspective like this, three-quarter perspective view of the face, which I already have huge problems with the head in three-quarter perspective. You always see in all my videos, you'll see me fiddling and tweaking and moving stuff around, 1 pixel up, 1 pixel down, 1 pixel left and right. Oh my god, it's very frustrating for me, but I guess they usually come out okay. I mean, at some point I think they're okay. That's why, otherwise I wouldn't publish them at all. I wouldn't show anybody. But yeah, I do still have, I feel like I have the biggest problem with that. I mean, it's not hard for me to draw the rest of the body, for instance. Not that hard. I also, of course, I also tweak that a lot, but I tweak everything, but mostly the face, and especially when there's glasses involved. And in this case, raindrops and the glasses themselves, they have highlights, and then you have raindrops on top of the glasses that also have highlights. That yeah. And I'm flattening in the first colors here, as you see, flat colors, as I usually do, on separate layers to start with. That just, why not? It's easy to do. Just make a new layer and put the, fill the lasso on another layer instead of filling it on the same layer. It's a very there's very few extra steps to take in the beginning when you're working to actually achieve that separation, and then after that it's easy to keep the separation. After that it's like you have a layer mask, but it's see, I added a little bit of red right there in the, this is supposed to be bounce light coming up from here. Yeah, I'm shading it, as you see here, starting with the shadow. Now I'm adding the highlights, like three different tones, the shadow, the intermediate, and the highlight. And the same thing for the t-shirt, which is just a little lighter than the skin, and then the underwear, which is a lot lighter than the skin. They're basically white. So, but I can't paint them bright white yet, like full 100% white yet. I'm holding off on that. Yeah, it's tricky. It's dangerous to go to max out from the start. You can always max it out later by using auto contrast on a selected layer. So yeah, I usually try to not go. I try to approach it in steps, tonally, like not go 100% black, not go 100% white from the beginning. But in a nighttime scene like this, of course, there is a lot of 100% black right now in the background, although I do lighten some areas later. But if it was daytime, I would have started out with 50%, some other intermediary tone, and then I always do this thing with auto contrast, not on everything at once, but on selected areas or selected layers, and then I fade them with the fade button, which you'll see me do. I use it on strokes also, but fading is especially useful tool. I use it a lot for many different things. Here I am shading in the zombies with three tones. The intermediate one, which was the original blue, flat blue, and then the rim light is one tone, and the basically black is black applied like watercolor, you know, with some adjusting of the opacity. Like I don't press 100% everywhere. It's a bit like painting with charcoal or watercolor or a big fat black crayon. And you saw me doing the fire there in the background, the napalm. It's fairly easy. I started with yellow and then just went downwards from there, a bit darker, orangey, brownish. Here I am starting the face now. The infamous difficult 3/4 view face. For some reason, for me, it's even more difficult when it's slightly animified like this one, by which I mean, you know, the exaggerated anime look, manga look of the larger eyes and the smaller nose and the smaller mouth. I never seem to hit it the first. I don't know if I ever hit it, but I definitely don't hit it on the nail from the very first sketch. So the stuff that I'm drawing here is gonna be wobbling around. It's gonna be liquefied and warped a lot, moved around, cut and paste, move. See, I'm already starting that right here, but I'll do more of that later, even more. So yeah, well, at least she starts out looking recognizably like some kind of generic cute girl anyway. The rim light there. The rim lights are easy to do also when you have your layer mask, which is not what I would call it, but other people use actual layer masks, but for me I just lock the opacity, which you can see here on the side here. I just lock the opacity of the layer, and then I just use that as a layer mask, and so it's, you know, it's easy. You just paint next to the edge with in this case blue. Let's see, I made some notes about rim lights. Let me read those notes. Yeah, see if it fits. Always do a rim light. That's kind of my method, my philosophy. I usually make my rim lights bluish because it looks better, especially for night scenes. But of course it also depends. If you have a strong colored light source like the fire back there, then of course you have to make the rim light a bit yellowish. Not as yellow as the fire, not as bright and yellow as the fire, because it's bouncing, you know. So with each bounce, light loses a little bit of its energy, so it'll be slightly less hot and yellow. And but generally speaking, if you don't know that you have a strongly colored light source back there that's some other color, like green or red or orange or whatever, then use this kind of bluish thing, which that's we get it partially from Hollywood, because when Hollywood records night scenes, they use a strong light, but everything else is black, but they use one strong directional light, and it's usually kind of bluish. Whether they color the light itself or they just adjust the color later in post-production, but the blue is supposed to make us think of the moon, you know, like moonlight. Although paradoxically the moon is warmish, you know, like it's kind of yellow greenish. If it has any tint at all, it's not blue. The moon is not blue. But anyway, this is a convention. it's a lot of people use. And I think it works because cold light pushes back into the image and warm comes forward. So the rim light is usually further back, and all the other lights, which here, this warm part here, is usually closer to the viewer. Notice that I've also warmed up the edges here a little bit, which is something that happens with skin. It's very useful to do that with skin. You can see it a little bit here. I use the same warming technique on the cheeks and the nose, but also here at the edges of the shadow on this side and on this side. And I would also put it on the ear. I have also put it on the ear a little bit, but yeah, making it stronger. I think I made it stronger later. Right now I'm working on the hair. Let's check my notes here. Yeah, layers. My layer stack is quite simple. You don't see it right now, but sometimes you see it there in the edge. It's quite simple and organized according to the old school principle of Disney's multiplane camera, which you can look up online. They had a huge camera that was separating objects according to further and nearer on layers of glass, and according to their materials in some cases. Not in this case. I'm not separating out materials in this case, but if you have gold inlay on a wooden surface, for instance, that's where you would put the gold on one layer and the wood surface on another layer. So glasses, so let's start from the bottom up. It's background, fire, zombies, smoke, and the girl. Smoke and the girl on the same, the smoke from the gun and the girl, and also her breath smoke. Glasses, clothes, water droplets on the girl, the rain itself, and right up at the top, the original sketch. Soon I'll merge down the glasses and clothes onto the girl to be easier managed and edited together. Sometimes you have, at a certain point, very often it becomes much more easy to have the glasses merged down into the face and this clothing to merge down with the skin, because in this case they are treated relatively similarly. They have the similar colors, they have similar tone, they're going to both be equally wet, and if I need to move her body around, this fairly tight clothing, it's going to have to follow the body, so it will be a huge inconvenience to have to adjust this shoulder straps, for instance, separately from the body if I want to move the shoulders around a little bit. So those are the considerations when you probably want to merge stuff back down. And it's not a one-way process. You can always separate it back out again by just a little bit of careful selection. It'll just take a few minutes to select the glasses and separate them out again. You know, it's not like you lost a lot of work if you do that. So those are the considerations to choose when to merge stuff down. Yeah, working on the face now, on the head, on the hair. This is just polishing. This is the slower part of the whole process. Obviously, it's the 80-20 rule. 80% of the work happens at the end. It takes 80% of the time to do the last 20% of polish, so to speak. And actually, you won't see this hair. This hair looks dry, so that's kind of a mistake. So this hair is not going to be looking like this in the end. I made it progressively. I made it darker and darker, and I have another layer with shine, with wetness on it, which I brought up. I brought in more and more wetness on a second layer, and also darkening the hair progressively. Like they almost became more like the glasses here. That they're almost black and white. Which is what happens even with blonde hair at night in rain with a small focused light source hitting it. Later you'll see some reference I was using as well for more for the rain, but yeah. The lips, the mouth. I'm going to be adjusting the nose in a little bit too, because this nose is too much upturned and it's a bit too wide across the bridge as well, as you can see. So I'm going to be moving this area to the left. I'm going to be moving the nose tip down. But right now I'm working on the color and tone mouth. Sharpening up the chin area, jaw area a little bit there. You see the fade tool, that window that keeps popping up, that's the fade tool I use. You make a strong stroke and then you fade it back with the fade slider, and it's just wonderful. I just love it because I can focus on placing the stroke with the appropriate color first, and then separately focus on how much pressure, so to speak, you know. If I would have done it without the fade slider, I would have also had to think about the pressure at the same time. And it's very difficult to do, to think about three things at the same time, and then you're like, oh, that was a perfect stroke, except for, oh, I made it just a tiny little bit too strong, but I can't undo it. Well, you can go to the fade and just pull it down to 80% instead of 100, you know, stuff like that. Now I'm working on the zombies, adding texture, not adding too much detail to these really distant ones here, just strategic detail, like just right in the face, a little bit around the eyes and nose, and these ones even less detail, you know, but I'm adding, again, very strategically, like just darkening some areas in the face. I mean, you see here, this is kind of fun process actually. Doing monsters is fun because you can't really, it's difficult to, you don't get that effect that you do with the 3/4 anime girl face, you know, where every little change makes a huge difference and you're like, oh no, now I ruined it, she looks ugly now, you know, like, doesn't matter with a zombie, they're already ugly, so, you know, who cares, you can have fun with it. And yeah, you see, just strategic, I'm not repainting the whole thing, I'm just adding a little bit of sharper strokes here and there. Some lighter, sharper strokes, some darker, sharper strokes. Yeah, I enjoyed this process much more than some other parts of this picture. Let's see. I wonder if I added the freckles yet. We'll see when we get back to it. I'm not. I'm obviously not painting this fast. This is speeded up like 10 times. So, and this was done over a period of, like, I work at night time when I come back from work, an hour or so, half an hour, every day. Sometimes less, maybe, I don't know. It depends how late I come back home from work. And you see the texture there? That's just a simple texture brush, texture stamp that I just put over, like cracked mud type of thing, which I feel is suitable for dried up mummified zombies. But anyway, yeah, so I just do a little bit every day. This is like grass, this is like, I don't know, vegetation or grass, but it was just a really heavily textured brush on its own layer, and then, you know, adding some more, and then there was the fade brush, fade tool again, and then I'll just sort of adjust it with, you can, since it's on its own layer there, I could have faded it out. Now I'm adding some fiery highlights there, but I don't think I did actually fade it out. I think I was kind of happy with this this blue-green sort of tint, because the lights are bluish, so the grass wouldn't be, you know, normal daylight green. It would be a bluish green instead of just pure green. And just adding some, yeah, these are very minor tweaks here, polishing around, changing, very minute changes being made now to the, yeah, see, I moved the ground, moving the lights down a bit there. That's easy to do because they're on their own layer. And yeah, she has a lot of work left, as you can see here. Still quite rough, so I guess I'm saving the least fun stuff for last, because this is very difficult to do. It's not as fun as the zombies, so yeah, sometimes you have to sharpen up a little bit, because with my type of process, the brushes I use, it's I don't know if it's the same way for other artists, but it kind of blurs out after a while because you move stuff around, you fade, you have layers, the emerging layers, you fade layers, you merge again, and you know, tweaking. After a while, it just goes increasingly blurry. So sometimes I try the sharpening tool even during the process. I always use the sharpening tool right at the end on a JPEG, not on the Photoshop file, because it's a destructive process. But when you save out a JPEG, you can experiment on the final. You can experiment with some sharpening. But I also do use it, like I said here, like you noticed during the process of painting in certain areas at certain times. And here I'm yeah, tweaking her body, tweaking her collarbones here. Which I never know until much later if I was actually doing it right. That's why I come back to a place, I tweak it a bit more, there's the fade again. I come back, I tweak it, come back, tweak it, you know, you have to go away and come back, or I do anyway. I very often have to, that helps me a lot to do that actually. Here I'm trying to do a more natural cloth folding than what we had before. So from the nipple is actually where the cloth will be, how shall I say, the folds will sort of radiate away from whatever is pushing the most at the cloth, and that's this area right here. So I have to create a slightly different sort of form here for, and which I did. You know, I created this larger cloth fold, and this is also very tricky, this area here, because you know, wet t-shirt contest, if you don't just get distracted by, oh yeah, hold on, let me explain this. This is, I'm gonna stop this here, and I'm gonna explain this part. This is just sort of a test to show you what I'm doing. But first, let me finish my thought about the wet t-shirt contest. Wet cloth, wet cotton cloth, or wet whatever on top of skin, relatively tightly, not too loosely. It creates a extremely intricate pattern where it sticks to the skin, but then there's a bubble, and then it sticks to the skin, and there's a bubble. So these sort of bubbly shapes, which are basically just folds but that are partially stuck to the skin, is extremely difficult to paint. So that's why I didn't go into too much detail here, because I didn't have the reference, and it's just, it would have been an insane amount of work for not much reward in terms of impact to the image, the final you know, the final effect that I'm after. So now about these, this is a how to paint wet highlights. It's a good way to do it anyway. So you can see here, I had some selections here. I can back up a little bit. Let's see if I can back up a little bit. So play. So I'm still painting this new form that I wanted. I'm still doing that part. Okay. And then sorry about this. Yeah, so these are just some generic sprinkles, but then I started to select areas. That's the blood. I'm just increasing the blood, which I will do again even more later. Okay, still haven't gotten to that spot yet. Okay, so yeah, I'm selecting. You see these selected areas here, and then I airbrush into the selected areas on a different layer, of course, because otherwise it's very hard to control later. Yeah, you don't want, yeah, here comes the freckles I mentioned earlier. You don't want 100% white when you do that. You want some edges to be less affected, and some edges to be, you want some edges to be fairly sharp and strong and popping out, and some edges not at all. So that's why I use the airbrush, set to not too large a size, you know, just large enough airbrush to, I'm cleaning up the eyes here again on a separate layer, and then I'll just copy that eye over there. That's the quickest and smartest way to do that. Yeah, I don't see any reflections in this image which I can point to as yeah, smoothing out some parts here that got too sharpened when I sharpened it earlier, if you remember. And oh, by the way, these freckles are also on another layer. Later, they're not blurred enough right now, I can see here, but later I actually do blur them a little bit more. So I think this is the final go at the face. I'm gonna start doing the things I mentioned earlier, like I'm gonna move the tip down there of the nose a little bit. Just generally polishing everything. I tried to open up the sclera. I tried to push the sclera color up a little bit here to show that, to make it look more scared, basically, because if you lower the upper eyelids down too far, it doesn't make a person look scared. It just makes them look languid, even tired, or at least quite calm. So yeah, you get a sort of a crazy scared expression if the more white you show above the iris, you know, the bigger is that effect. There was a back and forth there. I had an experimental layer for the face that I used to see if I liked my changes, and that's always a safe way to work, because you might come back a day later and discover that you didn't really like the changes at all. And now we're starting the rain using reticulation. I'm going to pause it there. It's in filters, reticulation under filters. You do it on a medium gray, and then you use auto contrast, which I'm doing right here, and then you invert it, like this, and then you scale it to suit you, tweak the curves for more or less intensity of the rain, and then motion blur like this. And then you fade it in and out. And I actually had two different layers with slightly different angles on the motion blur there. And you can use curves again to make more rain or less rain, and you can fade the whole layer to make more rain or less rain. Now you got to remember to erase this layer strategically. But here I'm using the layers as a mask to apply, you know, wherever light is behind the rain, it's going to refract in the raindrops like this, so it's going to spread outwards from the source of light a little bit like that. So that's a separate layer. The glowy raindrops are on a separate layer, and the actual raindrops are on a separate layer. Now you need to erase some of the actual raindrops here, because especially towards the bottom, because they're hitting the earth and disappearing. So you have to take into account that there will be fewer raindrops. Here's my reference also for the rain. You want to, and these larger drops there, I'm going to try to replicate them now here in my as well. So these are water that accumulates on her body and just sort of dribbles off larger drops. And I use a little bit of motion blur on those as well. It's just a quick way to paint them more nicely. Otherwise, you have to do that thing where you paint each one with care, which is to see. Here you can see again, I'm doing the. You can see some of the selected areas here that I partially filled with airbrush, and that's what I was talking about earlier about the wetness look. And I'm starting to make the hair more wet here. I added some strands that have kind of glued themselves to her skin here. I added those, and I am now adding a crazy amount of droplet highlights. These are drops. This is water stuck to her skin, but of course this is just, you know, I'm going to erase some, and I'm going to fade the whole layer out. I don't want them over here because they're like 99% lit by that strong streak of light that is coming through. Also on the rim light. The rim light is lighting up these water drops a little bit right there. But I don't want them in the shadowy parts over here. That's not going to look right. Oh, and you saw me twisting the gun smoke earlier, because in the background the wind seems to be blowing in the opposite direction of the gun smoke you see here. Now here's the finished one, and let me go through if there's anything here that I forgot to talk about earlier. Yeah, the gun smoke was just going straight off in this direction before, so I bent it back here, because you can see by this smoke here that the wind is going to the right in the background. Now, of course, it's entirely possible that the wind can go in different directions in different parts of the image, but I, I didn't want to correct it completely. I didn't want the gun smoke to go across here. You know, that would be just stupid, because it would interfere with the actual gun shape itself. It would interfere with her face, even possibly, and hair and all that. So the gun smoke has to go in this direction initially, but then of course it's you know, but the visual design allows it to come back. And actually, it's good design to bend things like this, because it will lead the eye back into the image like this, in a sort of I know the eye doesn't do the eye doesn't move in curves. The eye moves in straight lines, in little jumps, like pop, 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 but maybe, yeah, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 back, you know, like that. It's called saccades or saccades or whatever. I don't know. I don't know how to pronounce it, but you can look it up. Saccades. Yeah, so a lot of rain over here, because we got lights highlighting the rain from behind, and we also got a distance, so that you know, the more distance you're looking through, the more raindrops you're going to be looking through. Here is less distance. We're this Earth, it's closer to us, so you have to erase some of the rain down here. And here you have to erase a lot of the rain, which I didn't actually do. I still have small raindrops visible in front of her, which is bad. But we can pretend that there is a whipping wind that is like really thrashing the raindrops into smaller raindrops, or they're hitting a large object outside of the image here, and sort of, you know, when a big raindrop hits something, it separates into many smaller raindrops, etc., etc., whatever. So, and you see here also I made the hair much darker, and sort of with stronger highlights to make it look wet. I'm not sure if I entirely succeeded with the hair there, but I'm fairly happy with the glasses finally, so that's at least something. Yeah, I added a scratch here on her chest, because she had blood here originally, and I just wanted to be logical about, like, it also helps the storytelling. She's been damaged by the hunt, by the running, maybe by a zombie. Maybe she's already infected. We don't, you know, that's kind of adds to the excitement, I guess. So I increased the amount of blood here as well, which would logically be happening. But as you see, it's kind of blurry. You know, it's kind of, I use the airbrush quite a lot, because when everything is wet, blood will kind of spread like watercolor in water. So let's see if I forgot to mention anything. No, that's it. Hope you like it. Let me know if you have any feedback or questions. Thanks for your support, and see you next month.